Okay, why don't we kick off? Thank you again all for joining us today. We're excited to chat with everyone, and I will now turn it over to ASH Executive Director Laurent Hubert.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you all for joining us today, and welcome to this ASH 2024 Town Hall, which provides an opportunity for us to exchange and have an opportunity also to have a more direct contact. So the chat box is open, so feel free to introduce yourself, and you will have an opportunity, obviously, to ask questions. So feel free to use the Q&A, but later on, after the staff will just do very brief presentations, and then you feel free to also raise your hand if you want to take the floor and open your camera so we can see each other's faces. But if you have any questions at any time, also you can use the Q&A, and after the staff has talked, there will be an opportunity for you to talk and ask for the floor. And I'm excited to share with you some of the and give the opportunity to the staff to share with you some of the accomplishments of the year. And there's been so many things that have happened this year. The staff has participated in more than 3 global treaty negotiations, so helping basically create global legislation on areas that impact tobacco control. We've also engaged in various UN human rights treaty processes. We've worked on the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, the Tobacco Treaty, and with quite a lot of success this year. We've had a second round of with a lawsuit against the FDA because of the menthol issue, and you'll hear maybe a bit more about that later. We've had a very successful Endgame Summit and an ongoing Endgame course and technical assistance to help jurisdictions move towards Endgame. We continue to hold the tobacco industry accountable and tracking them also, and tracking tobacco industry interference in public health policy and through corporate political donations. We've submitted multiple reports to UN treaty bodies and framing how the tobacco industry is it's an obstacle to human rights. And this is very important given that one of our key obstacles to achieving and making progress towards tobacco control is often lack of whole of government engagement. We've also been addressing tobacco, the environmental impact of tobacco. We've done those through negotiations of a plastic treaty that calls for a ban on cigarette filters, but the other work also that you probably will hear through the session today. And continued supporting the accelerated implementation of tobacco endgame policies, and done that at the treaty level, at the global level, to try to get some global consensus on what to do in this area, as well as working and supporting local jurisdictions. So much of that work, and so we've seen quite a lot of progress, and we're quite excited about what's going on. And much of it has been obviously thanks to your support and the support of our support donors. So I want to remind actually everyone that thanks to a few generous supporters, ASH is able to conduct a fundraising match where all donations up to $20,000 will be matched for this Sunday, December 15th. And I'm sure Megan can put a link on if anyone is interested in supporting this. So we have prepared a few slides. If Megan, if we could maybe have those in on the screen. I don't see the slides. Are they visible to others or?
I
But
think
on
they're up. Yeah.
they're okay because I cannot see them. So on the first one, that list is one of the things we want to address is we're dealing with a product, and it's a consumer product. I would definitely not consider it a consumer good, but that kills exactly when used as intended. And what would happen if we were trying to, if it had not been in the market today, if this product was just entering the market today, it clearly would not be allowed. So ASH is really trying to address that issue and work, create a regulatory environment where we regulate the product based on the harm it does. And that means not allow it to be sold everywhere the way it is today. For the next one on our purpose, as you know, ASH is the oldest anti-tobacco nonprofit in the U.S. fully dedicated to tobacco control, and started since ’67. But unfortunately, even despite all those years of being in action, the tobacco industry still kills over 8 million people a year worldwide, and it remains the number one cause of preventable death. And so our goal at ASH is to achieve a world where no one has to die because of tobacco. And in terms of our history, you may have, here we have a picture with Dr. Everett Koop, and next to him you see one of our board members, Dr. Al Munzer. And at that time, like in the mid 60s, the first executive director of ASH, John Banzaf, had managed to get the FTA to ban cigarette commercials from radio and TV, thanks to the fairness doctrines, which gave equal rights to anti-tobacco messages after a tobacco ad. So thanks to this work at the end, and tobacco ads were banned from TV and radio. And then we did further work to ban smoking in airplanes, and that was really the focus for ASH until 2000, to really focus on protecting non-smokers' rights and promoting smoke-free policies, something that was considered really radical all the way to the early 2000s, actually. And then we played a major role through the development of the first Global Public Health Treaty, the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, and we're very proud of those accomplishments. And since then, we've done more work, also helping integrate tobacco in the UN Development Agenda by getting, for example, Article 3A in the UN Sustainable Development Goals, we call on countries to strengthen the implementation of the Tobacco Treaty, the FCTC. But then in 2016, we felt that we needed to go even beyond integrating tobacco in the development agenda. And we felt we had a tobacco treaty, but more needed to be done. And that's when we felt that we needed to really fully engage in a human rights-based approach to tobacco control, to ensure that everyone's right to health is protected from the tobacco industry, no matter who it is. And at that point is when we started also looking to address the phasing out of tobacco products to protect the health of citizens. And our vision is the world free from the harm caused by tobacco, and our mission to advocate for innovative legal and policy measures to end the global tobacco epidemic. So often we try to be a catalyst when it comes to tobacco control, do things before they're overly popular or everyone is doing them. And for example, you may be familiar with the criminal liability work, for example, that was pioneered by Ash and Kelsey, trying to use criminal liability in order to hold the tobacco industry accountable for the harm it does. And so what are some of the key things that we do? As I mentioned, you hear more from the staff today. Really advocate and push towards the tobacco endgame philosophy, so to speak. And much has changed in the past few years. For example, when we started negotiating the WHO Framework on Tobacco, Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, the Tobacco Treaty, that concept would have been totally was considered overly radical until not that long ago. That was still the case, even in 2020, at the beginning of the COVID epidemic. It was considered a totally radical approach, but much has changed since Beverly Hills first passed the legislation phasing out the sale of tobacco products. We've had in Manhattan Beach, then New Zealand, which passed a tobacco-free generation, not to reverse it because of political changes. But now we have the UK moving forward in that area. Several jurisdictions in Massachusetts are going nicotine-free, and is being proposed at the whole state level. So a tremendous amount of change in that area. Liability, as I mentioned earlier, exploring the criminal liability concept, and also proactive litigation, like for example, also like the FDA litigation against the FDA. We had a second round of litigation against the FDA for inaction on menthol, but also looking at potential human rights litigation. And obviously using human rights mechanisms and arguments. And we've submitted numerous reports to UN treaty bodies, making tobacco control interventions. And this is really, really important, given that in many, many cases, in addition to tobacco industry interference as one of the main obstacles to making progress towards tobacco control objectives, it's also the fact that there's a lack of whole of government coordination and cooperation when it comes to tobacco control. For example, when we talk about the tobacco treaty, very often outside of health ministries, other ministries are not aware of it, or other ministries can sometimes take steps against the tobacco policies. So that's a really important work. We obviously continue working on the tobacco treaty because it is really the global parliament on tobacco control. And Ash is very proud and honored to have an observer relationship with this treaty, of an official relationship with the treaty, and being able to lead many of the civil society campaigns on key issues, such as the endgame, the issue of endgame on as the way it is addressed on the treaty, through Article 2.1, leading on the human rights agenda in the tobacco treaty, taking a leadership role on the article on litigation, taking a leadership role on the article on the environment, also making the link between the tobacco treaty and environmental treaties. And obviously also working on environment. The environmental impact of tobacco is non-negligible. It's quite important. More than 600 million trees every year are chopped because of because of tobacco. 200,000 hectares of land. 22 billion tons of water is being used for tobacco products. All of this while producing about 84 million tons of CO2, and also with the littering of 4.5 trillion cigarettes in the world, cigarette butts, which pollute our environments, oceans, rivers, our city sidewalks, parks, soil, and beaches. So it really has an important impact. So we've addressed through a plastic treaty, for example, where we promote the banning of cigarette filters, which most of them are made out of plastics. But also we work, and we're going to work beyond that with other environmental platforms to ensure, for example, that all filters are banned, even if they were not made out of plastic. So quite a lot of work has been taking place and will continue to take place into 2025. So I will give now the floor to Chris Bostic, who will be presenting a little bit some of the work on tobacco endgame.
Great. Thank you, Laurent, and welcome everyone. I'm glad you could join us. 2024, probably not a great year overall for society, but for Endgame, it has been one of the best we've had. So we started 2024 with 8 Endgame laws in place worldwide. And as of last night, we have 17. So it's more than doubled already. And you can look for 2 more by the end of the year that we think are going to happen. Unfortunately, we did lose New Zealand after a new government took power in late 2023. In February of 24, they rescinded their groundbreaking endgame laws. However, the barn door closed too late, and the word was out, and other countries began to consider what New Zealand was doing. A month ago, the Upper Parliament of South Australia, which is a state with 1.8 million people, passed nicotine-free generation. And we're looking at the lower house of parliament to engage on that either in January or February. And advocates there think there's a good chance that it could pass, and that would be the biggest, by far, jurisdiction in the world with an endgame law. For those who are unfamiliar, when I say nicotine-free generation or tobacco-free generation, I'm referring to a sales ban with a grandfather clause, where a birth date is set, and anyone born on or after that date can never be sold tobacco. So it's a politically palatable way to move to endgame if a complete ban is not palatable. And we also are looking at the United Kingdom, where the House of Commons recently had its second reading of a tobacco-free generation law, and it passed 9-1 by members of Parliament. It's not a party issue. It's supported by both parties as well as the monarchy. It is now in committee, and sometime early in the new year, it will go to the House of Lords and hopefully pass. That is a tobacco-free generation law. It focuses on tobacco products, which is defined by products with actual tobacco in it. However, the law includes much stricter regulations on vaping. And then we had a first this year at the in the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control Conference of the Parties, when they took up the issue of Article 2.1, which Laurent mentioned earlier. Article 2.1 calls on governments to go further than the specific obligations in the tobacco treaty, and we have called that the endgame article for several years. And so they considered it and set up an expert group to meet between COP10 and COP11, which is happening in about a year. And that expert group will publish a paper detailing all the research that has gone on about Endgame and looking at the various policy options that governments have. It should be the most thorough look at Endgame that we've ever had. So we can expect that to be public sometime in August, I believe. And Megan, we can probably go to the next slide now. So one of the hottest spots that we have had this year is Massachusetts. You may remember that Brookline, Massachusetts, was the first place to pass a nicotine-free generation law that basically banned the sale of tobacco products to anyone born this century. Now they were sued, but the law went into effect. They won the lawsuit on a motion to dismiss, and of course, the industry appealed it anyway to the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court. In March, that court unanimously decided that towns do have the right to pass these laws. And since then, 9 more towns have followed, including one last night. So now we have 10. We can expect number 11 tonight, I believe, and number 12 next week. So it's taking off very rapidly. All of the subsequent laws to Brookline have set a birth date of January 1st, 2004. So anyone born after 2003 will not be able to be sold tobacco, which means that they're all coming into effect on January 1st. So in just 3 weeks, so that there will now be people that over 21 in those places that cannot be sold tobacco. And I want to give a shout out to the people in Massachusetts who are making this happen. This is not a big, well-funded campaign. It is a handful of volunteer advocates that are spending their evenings driving around to various town meetings to push for nicotine-free generation and acting as experts for boards of health. So they were recognized last week at the State House for their efforts, and at the same time, there was an announcement that a statewide nicotine-free generation bill will be introduced in January. And if you recall, if you've been in tobacco control long enough, this is what happened with smoke-free air in Massachusetts. Dozens of towns passed comprehensive indoor smoking bans, and then the state stepped in and made it statewide. So we're hoping that will follow here. And then I want to go off to the other coast and talk about Santa Cruz County, which a few weeks ago became the first jurisdiction in the world to ban cigarette filters, the sale of cigarette filters. It hasn't come into effect yet, but when it does, it will mean that filtered cigarettes cannot be sold there. And that's something we've been pushing for not only at the plastics treaty, but at the national level for a long time. And there are multiple countries looking at this seriously, including Belgium and the Netherlands, which have actually moved quite a bit forward on pushing that. And then this year we had our first ever National Endgame Summit in Washington, D.C. Almost every national tobacco control organization was present. We had federal, state, and local health officials, researchers, and elected officials. It was a big success, and we intend to follow it up in 2025. I want to give a big thank you to the supporters of that summit: Truth Initiative, Kaiser Permanente, the American Heart Association, MD Anderson Cancer Center, the National Cancer Institute, and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Look for a lot more movement in the coming year. This is now becoming a thing. It's no longer the radical notion that it was when we started Project Sunset almost 7 years ago. So we're very excited to see what happens in 2025. And Megan, I believe I bounce to you.
I believe it's Carol who's
Yeah.
next. Carol is going to present next more on also on Endgame and some of the work that has been done. But as Chris presented, it's just what an amazing progress. When we started really focusing on this in 2016, almost no jurisdictions, just Bhutan was the Bhutan had a law, but it was not implemented, an endgame law. And there was, I think it was Mecca and Medina, but also not very well implemented. And now it's really become a bit of the topic du jour, like a central theme for tobacco control, for the tobacco control movement. So this is quite amazing. And understand, Chris, that also in Holland this week, the parliament is discussing the topic of endgame, and understand also we'll be voting on it based on the result of a citizens initiative. So we're a petition initiative with enough signature and enough people in the Netherlands called for that and called for a tobacco-free generation process to be implemented in the Netherlands, that it will be present. It will be this being then discussed in the part of the parliament. And I think it's worth pointing out, and Ash and I know Chris has been working on a lot of the surveys and the research in the area, is that when we ask the general public, all of the surveys that have been done, and we've been involved in some in France, in Spain, in the EU, in the United States, in jurisdictions in the United States, and I believe, Chris, you've been working also with low-income countries, and almost in every case, there's a tremendous amount of public support for those policies. So it's amazing to see that progress. But Carol, now the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone, and as Chris said, thank you for being here. I'd like to discuss an activity that ASH launched in September of 2023. We launched our Endgame, it's an online Endgame policy and advocacy course. There are 9 modules in the course, of which you can see the topics here. They cover things like the basics of what is Endgame, to more considerable considerations like legal considerations, policy and research, environment. Often very popular modules are our strategic planning and communication modules. These are available to anyone to participate in through our ASH California webpage you see at the bottom of this slide. This is a free course. You register at the link on the bottom and we will activate your membership, and then you will have access to all 9 modules. Each of the modules in the end of 2023 were followed up with a live discussion from experts in that area. We weren't able to continue those into early 2024, but I'm thrilled to announce that we now have our live discussions active again. So our next live discussion is January 23rd, 2025. And if you have watched any of the modules or participated in them, you'll receive an invitation to participate in this live discussion, where we have a very casual, informal back and forth about the content of the modules, questions you have, any issues that you'd like to bring up. And also it's an opportunity for you to request any technical assistance that you might need over the issue of Endgame and all the ancillary topics that includes. We hope that you will join us and watch the modules. They're, as I said, they're very interesting and very thorough in the concept of Endgame. And you can look forward to the first live discussion of January 23rd. And with that being said, I will turn it back to you, Megan.
Thank you, Carol. And indeed, it's been amazing to see the attendance at in those modules, and even with the first round, we were so fortunate to see key people in governments from all over the world really join those modules, suggesting a strong interest in the topic. So I really encourage all of you, if you have not yet had a chance to sign up, to do so and participate in those. And you'll be definitely in presence of some of the tobacco control leaders around the world who have joined those modules. For the next slide, I'm giving the floor to Jamie Zuppo, who's going to speak about some of the Tobacco Endgame California work.
Yes, thank you, Laurent, and hi, everyone. I'm now going to share how California is advancing the tobacco endgame in partnership with the advocates and coalitions and public health leaders across the state. So our work in California centers around providing technical assistance that's tailored to meet the diverse needs of our communities. So if you look at this graphic here, you're going to see the key areas where we focus our efforts, and they're all just designed to drive the tobacco endgame forward. So I'm going to walk through them briefly with you. So first, we have our comprehensive website, and I will actually put that in the chat after I'm done talking. But if you haven't been there already, I highly suggest you check it out. It's got a lot of resources of all things related to the tobacco endgame. It offers easy access to policy updates, tools, and resources specifically tailored to California communities. But there is also a lot of information just in general about the endgame. So it would be very beneficial for all. For everybody to check out. We also have educational webinars there that are covering tobacco control topics like the environmental impact of tobacco production and consumption, and the emerging trends. We also have some on policy development, or even just about communication strategies. There are just a bunch of webinars that equip advocates with tools and knowledge that really help make an impact. And they also just provide a space to stay connected with others in the tobacco control community. We also have fact sheets and infographics. We're big believers in visual communication as well. So we help design infographics, like I said, graphics, to help raise awareness and build momentum for this action. For example, we have a fact sheet on endgame talking points, as well as one for endgame counter arguments that are very popular. And so they're just great resources. We also have them available in Spanish. A lot of them are available in Spanish. And if for some reason you see something that you would like to be added, or you want something custom and you're in California, feel free to reach out. We're happy to do that for you. We also then have community trainings, which really the heart of our work is empowering our local leaders. So we, through these trainings, like our spokesperson training, which is extremely popular, and our Endgame 101, these are all trainings that really help our individuals craft and deliver impactful messages while building really a solid foundation of what's happening around the Endgame right now. We also have our Tobacco Endgame Matters podcast, which is also an incredible resource. I highly encourage you to check that out. It's basically a podcast that explores pathways to achieving the tobacco-free California. And we actually had our last one we just recently launched, had our very own Kelsey and Dennis, I believe his name, I can't replace his last name, but they were talking about the human rights factor on commercial tobacco. And it's a very good podcast. I highly recommend that one as well. And then we have our Endgame training course, which Carol just talked about. And you can register for that in the link that's in the chat. And that's obviously, like, as she said, a very powerful 9-module course. We also provide toolkits like our Speakers Bureau toolkit, which also just help empower advocates to deliver impactful presentations on tobacco control, and they offer guidelines for tailoring messages to diverse audiences. And then we also have our paid media campaigns, which are, again, those are pretty strictly for California folks only, but we will pay for the development and for the creation of these paid media campaigns, which we run on a special platform called Feather. And basically, these ads will be directed to a URL, or if you have a particular spot where you're wanting this material to go to, these are a good way to basically ensure that to just ensure that you're getting your message across a large audience. So that's what we have got going on for California, lots of exciting things. And again, if you have any technical assistance needs, or if you have something that you in fact need customized for your particular group, feel free to reach out to us. We are happy to help. Thank you, and I'll pass it on to whoever's next.
All right, thank you, Jamie. And so again, if you're from California, make sure you maximize on those resources. But even if you're not from California, a lot of those resources that Jamie mentioned are actually quite useful, even if you're outside of California. So I encourage you to check it all out. So the next speaker will be Megan, who will address one of the key obstacles, and I think I mentioned that earlier, in implementing tobacco or advancing in tobacco control policies and in protecting the health of our citizens, is really the tobacco industry interference. So Megan is going to present some key work we do in tracking lobbying and from tobacco industries and funding going from the tobacco corporations to politicians, as well as some of the work we do around the tobacco industry interference in the United States. So Megan, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Laurent. So under our work on the Global Tobacco Treaty, one of the things that we work on is tracking where the tobacco industry is trying to interfere in public health policy making. And so you heard Jamie talk about all those endgame resources that are available to advocates like each and every one of you. Well, we also have resources available for you on tracking tobacco industry interference. And the key one that we're highlighting for you all today is our lobbyist tracker. This is a project that we do each year where we're tracking the individual lobbyists and lobbying firms in every US state. And so there's an infographic on the right here. Those are just your top level numbers, but there's a whole interactive map on our website where you can click through each state. You can click on the state, it pops up into a chart. You can see the literal names of the folks who are lobbying for the tobacco industry. This is really helpful because you know who to tell your policymakers not to listen to when they are working on public health policy. And so we encourage everyone to check out their state, make sure that we haven't missed anyone. It's a very tedious research project, so we accept all the support we can get. If we've missed anyone, let us know. We will be updating this again next year. And this past year, though, we were able to also publish simultaneously the maps from the past 3 years. So that also gives you the chance to review the trends over the past few years, and where there have been an increase in lobbyists, things like that. So you're able to let folks in your state know sort of the trends of lobbyists happening at your local level. You can see here the lobbyists and lobbying firms by tobacco company, but so we also have it broken down by state. So whichever way you're looking to review that data, we have it there for you. We also do a tobacco industry interference index. That's more of a report highlighting how to keep the tobacco industry out of public health policy making. We do that in coordination with GGTC. They have a global industry index, and ASH does the US variation. So that'll also be coming out next year. And another way that we also work to highlight the tobacco treaty is through these webinars. We want to talk about the tobacco control policies that we know you're all working on, and then we also want to share ASH's cutting edge approaches. So you'll obviously continue to get more invitations from us to participate in webinars next year. We hope you'll all stick with us. If there are topics that you'd like to see discussed on this webinar series, definitely let us know. We're always open to sharing other ideas, or if you think you have something you'd like to present on a webinar, let us know. We're always open to exploring new ideas. I'll turn it back to you, Laura.
Thank you, Megan. And first, I want to recognize the work of Nichelle Gray, who is not joining us today because she just had a baby. So she's on maternity leave now, so she was not able to present here today. On the webinars, just as Megan pointed out, if you have suggestions, things you would like us to see addressed, do contact us. We actually I'm often asked to speak in a lot of webinars, and I participate in a lot of webinars organized by UN agencies and so on and so forth. And I'm proud to say that we have actually a very, very big reach. Some of our webinars are actually so often have a much higher attendance than a lot of the webinars organized even by UN agencies. So if you want to reach a global community, definitely let us know. So Megan mentioned the tobacco treaty. So we'll give the floor to Kelsey, who will give you a bit of an update about some of the work and some of the latest updates at the last round of negotiations of this treaty, which took place last February. Kelsey, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Laurent. I have all the acronyms, so I'm going to try my best to make sure I explain what they are, but feel free to put a hand up if I'm using one that you aren't familiar with. So we've mentioned the Tobacco Treaty a couple times today. That's also known as the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, or the FCTC. The FCTC, about every 2 years, has a COP, which stands for Conference of the Parties, when all of the parties come together and discuss the progress on the tobacco treaty. COP 10 was supposed to be in 2023, but it got pushed to February of 2024. So now I get to discuss it in this meeting because it's a wrap up from 2024. So we had a really exciting year at COP10. A lot of key decisions and areas that Ash works on that we're really excited about. I'm going to go in order of the articles. So Article 2.1, which includes a reference to endgame, to future methods. Article 2.1, we got the decision we were looking for, and it also established an expert group working towards COP11. So we are participating in the civil society work towards COP11 and monitoring the official expert group as well. So we will keep an eye out for that. COP11, I should mention, is in November of 2025, which, because of the COP10 being pushed back, is actually a much shorter timeline than we usually have. We don't have 2 years, so we're accelerating our work a little bit here. The next exciting decision that we got was on Article 19 on the environment. You're going to hear more about our environment work from Liz in a minute, but it was very important for us to tie the FCTC to environmental work that's happening, and this decision helped us do that. We also got a decision on Article 19, which is on liability, both civil and criminal, which is very important to me personally because of the work I do, including in our lawsuit against the FDA with our co-plaintiffs at the African American Tobacco Control Leadership Council on menthol. This is about international liability, best practices being used from country to country. So the Article 19 decision also established an expert group, an official one. There's also a civil society working group. And right now the expert group is collecting information from different countries around the world to provide best practices on liability to member countries. So we're excited to participate in that. And we're really excited that we have some of the best practices. They're coming from ASH. So that's really exciting as well. And then the last decision that we're very proud of at the COP was the human rights decision. We've been working towards this since COP 7 or 8, so it was a long time coming, but it officially links the FCTC and human rights and declares very clearly that the FCTC is a human rights treaty. So for our human rights work, that was a very important decision to have. And we will continue trying to incorporate human rights in many different articles of the FCTC as we move forward towards COP11, which again is in November of 2025. I think that's it on COP. Laurent, did you want to add something before I move on to the next?
No, go ahead, go straight ahead and
Okay.
human rights.
I also am talking about our human rights program today, and boy, is it hard to wrap up this program in a couple of minutes. It's been a very productive year. We've had several key reports, so I'm going to focus on those today. They frame the production, the marketing, and the sale of tobacco products as a human rights violation. One that actually has been in progress for more than just this year was a very substantial document on the Swiss government and their violation of human rights by their work with the tobacco industry. So we produced I think it ended up being over 110-page document that we envisioned as a prosecutor's brief to sort of hold the government of Switzerland accountable for the human rights violations of the tobacco companies. And for many of you, maybe you don't know, a lot of international tobacco companies are headquartered in Switzerland. And so Switzerland has an increased responsibility to protect the world, not just Swiss people, but the world from the harms of the tobacco industry. That report was very well received. We intend to use it to continue advocacy into coming years. We will use it to submit reports to human rights bodies and hopefully in the courts as well. We're hoping for an administrative case against the Swiss government on a human rights basis. So that was one of the big reports. Another big report process this year that I'm very proud of, we're calling our CEDAW Blast. CEDAW is another acronym, so I'm going to pause. It's the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. is the International Human Rights Treaty that protects women's rights specifically. And the committee that hears complaints for CEDAW is also called CEDAW, the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. So we have, for many years now, submitted reports when countries are due to report before CEDAW, which is about every 5 years for every country that's a party. But this year we decided to try to submit multiple reports in the same session, and we called it a CEDAW blast. So we're trying to get the committee's attention by submitting tobacco-related reports for as many countries as possible for that session. They usually hear about 8 countries at a time, and we had 4 country reports submitted at once. In addition, during that session, we were invited to have an informal briefing with the committee members about tobacco and human rights, which was a fantastic opportunity for us to talk in sort of a panel setting with the committee themselves about tobacco and why it's relevant to their work. So we're really hoping to build on that momentum in the future and to see CEDAW starting to question countries who come before them about their tobacco control laws and the influence it has on women and girls. We already have 1 report ready to go for the next session. I don't know how many international people we have on this call today, but anyone who's interested in participating in a country report, we would love to talk to you about that. And even if you are not in a country that can do so, we're always looking for help amplifying these. So we would love to add you to that list as well. So please just let us know. I think that's it for me. So back to you, Laurent. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelsey. And what you mentioned, for people who don't know, you mentioned an informal meeting with CEDAW committee. It's actually a very formal, to some extent, and closed meeting. So the terminology in UN settings is a little unusual, but actually it was an amazing honor because those are very difficult to get, those opportunities to organize an event under closed doors with the members of the committee, the 23 members of the committee responsible for promoting and monitoring the implementation of this treaty. And also, I think it's worth pointing out some of the other work that Kelsey, you've been doing and through all this work, because one of the things, for example, that happened in the CEDAW committee that Kelsey helped organize, she invited WHO and the Framework Convention Secretariat to be co-presenters at this event, and to some extent also helping the Secretariat fulfilling its mandate until the decision on human rights that she mentioned at COP10. So it's something that we're very proud of, Ash, of that work.
Can I interrupt for 1 second, Laurent? I'm the abbreviations patrol today. So WHO is the World Health Organization, and the Secretariat is the body that's responsible for maintaining the tobacco treaty. Sorry to interrupt.
No, absolutely. Thank you. And also, I think it's worth pointing out that, Kelsey, you helped with the submission to the Special Rapporteur on the Right to Health in the topic of harm reduction. So there within the UN system and the Office of the High Commissioner for Human and the UN Human Rights Council, there are mandate holders, and there's the Special Rapporteur on the Right to Health. And this year, she submitted a report on harm reduction for sustainable peace and development. And I know, Kelsey, you helped lead a submission on the topic, and I think it's worth pointing out, if you to anyone interested, to Google this document, because in this document, the Special Rapporteur on the Right to Health makes it very clear and raises strong concerns about the way the tobacco industry is used the harm reduction argument to its own benefit and as a way to market its products. So something worth looking for. But moving on from in the human rights section, one of the rights that has been recognized fairly recently, only a few years ago, is the right to a healthy environment. And it ties very much, and given we mentioned earlier that the tobacco industry has a quite important impact on the environment. So we also work quite in this area on the plastic treaty. So I'll give the floor to Liz Ferguson, who's been attending most of the negotiations for the plastic treaty for ASH. And she will give you a bit of a summary of where we're at and where we're going. Liz, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Laurent, and thank you to everyone for being here. So this year, ASH has continued to serve as a co-convener with our colleagues at GGTC of the Stop Tobacco Pollution Alliance, STPA for short. This is a coalition of about 100 public health organizations from both the tobacco control, health, and environmental communities that are working together to highlight some of the environmental harms caused by tobacco and to encourage collaborative solutions, such as support for the New Plastics Treaty. So this year, as Laurent just mentioned, ASH and our STPA Alliance members participated in 2 rounds of negotiations working on this treaty, INC 4, which means International Negotiating Committee, and INC 5, which just ended about a week and a half ago over in Busan, South Korea. So our priorities for our work around this treaty, we mentioned this a little earlier, but a ban on cigarette filters, which we all know are single-use plastics and are in fact the most littered plastic item in the world. Laurent mentioned earlier, 4.5 trillion of them are littered into the environment every single year. So again, we're looking for a ban in cigarette filters as part of this process. Another thing that we're interested in is an explicit reference to the WHO FCTC, the tobacco treaty, which Kelsey was just talking about. And a lot of our work at ASH is to link various treaties together with the various treaty bodies to have maximum impact. Also, one of our priorities is the establishment of a strong conflict of interest provision within the treaty process and the treaty text, which we know is a really heavy lift for this kind of agreement. And so it's something that we're not quite sure we're going to get in the treaty text. Again, we do think it's a heavy lift, but we do plan to continue raising the issue as progress moves forward. So speaking of thinking about INC 5, which we thought would be the final negotiation session for the treaty, as it turns out, while we did make progress at INC 5, unfortunately, we did not finalize the treaty development itself and then subsequently, of course, the final treaty text. That doesn't mean that the process is over. What it means is that there will be another round of negotiations in order to hopefully finalize the treaty. So we have another opportunity at working towards our priorities that I just mentioned. So the current status of the treaty, we do have cigarette filters listed. Cigarette filters that are made of plastic are listed in one of the draft annexes in the current version of the text. And as a reminder, cigarette filters have no health benefits. And so while we're seeing this as a partial win for the environment, this may not be a win for health because they're listed as cigarette filters made of plastic. We're calling for a total cigarette filter ban. But that is still up for negotiation and something we'll be going back to the table with our fellow Alliance members as we prepare for INC 5. At the moment, the FCTC is not explicitly mentioned in the treaty text. Many references to other international agreements have actually been removed as sort of the editing process for the treaty text. This wasn't because any country had a problem with the FCTC. Again, it was many other references were removed in favor of language like reference to other relevant bodies and mechanisms. So, and then, as I just mentioned, in terms of conflict of interest, while it's not included explicitly in the text at the moment, we are going to continue raising the issue within the negotiation process with all the stakeholders involved. And we understand that it may come up at the first conference of parties to the treaty. But again, in order for the conference of parties to take place for the plastic treaty, the treaty does need to be ratified and adopted and ultimately enter into force. So it may be a little bit before this item comes up. So in terms of where we are, again, our work here really indicates how challenging it can be to influence these negotiations. And while we're working towards achieving these outcomes, it really underscores the necessity of our ongoing work together at ASH, but also with our fellow coalition members. And so I see a couple of you that are members of the STPA that are on here today. I just want to give a quick shout out and thank you for all your collaboration this year. Laura Salgado from GGTC, which as we know is the Global Center for Good Governance on Tobacco Control, GGTC for short. Laura, thank you for all that you do, and thank you for being here today. And I think that that's all that I have for me at this point. But again, thank you all for being here, and thank you all for standing with us at ASH. And Laurent, I'll wrap it up and pass it over to you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. And again, I think this UN treaty to end plastic pollution is a key opportunity that we have to address cigarette filters, and maybe we can end up maybe in a few years a world that's just like in California and Santa Cruz, which banned all cigarette filters. Maybe we could end up having this scene expanded in jurisdictions around the world. And we're exploring also going beyond the plastic treaty. What other platforms can we use to advance tobacco control and to address again one of the key challenges that we have and we face when it comes to tobacco control policy is this lack of whole of government engagement. So how can we make sure that environmental ministries, trade ministries, and so on and so forth, they all work together with the environmental ministries to promote tobacco control policies. So something quite, so we're really looking forward to furthering that work. And we're going to have now an opportunity for Q&A. So, and also if you any of you is interested in taking the floor, because this is really meant to be fairly informal, feel free to raise your hand. But as you can see, quite a lot of has been achieved over the past few years, and I think we're in a quite a unique situation with tobacco control, and some of it reminds me a little bit of the way tobacco control was with smoke-free policies when before, in the early 2000s, we had like a few communities in California that were smoke-free. I think in California we had some policies. Norway had a very partial smoke-free ban, but that was it. The rest of the world, basically, we were all assaulted by tobacco smoke everywhere we went. And the topic was considered totally radical, having smoke-free policies, even within civil society. I remember within the Tobacco Negotiations Treaty, it was not even popular at the very beginning of the treaty negotiations, and then very quickly it changed. So we see quite a lot of progress with what we've seen with the things that Chris has mentioned with UK and Netherlands and other countries looking into endgame. But we also have, unfortunately, a lot of challenges ahead. Obviously, tobacco industry interference in the process, a lot of new products entering the market, including with synthetic nicotine products and nicotine analogs, which are sometimes used to circumvent policies. So it's still quite a lot of work to do. So again, I invite you, if anyone has any questions, I don't see any in the Q&A box. But I have one for the staff team and actually anyone here in the audience. As I mentioned with the smoke-free policies in 2003, it seemed in 2002. I remember the last one before we entered the penultimate round of negotiations for the FCTC for the tobacco treaty. Even the global alliance of NGOs would not reach consensus on smoke-free policies. And ASH, the American Lung Association, and only a handful of organizations advocated for this in the tobacco treaty. It made it in, and by a year later, it became the topic du jour. And now, so that was by 2004, more or less, and now 20 years later, numerous jurisdictions around the world are smoke-free. It's not perfect, not everywhere around the world, but numerous jurisdictions are smoke-free. It seems like we might be in a similar situation now, where we're starting to see some jurisdictions in California, in Massachusetts, implementing nicotine-free and tobacco-free policies. The UK now just also moving forward with this. So my question to some of you is, do you think it's possible, and do you think it's feasible? Is it likely that in 20 years, we could have most of the countries around the world having implemented a tobacco-free generation or nicotine-free generation policy and have phased out commercial tobacco products out of the market? Do you think that's feasible? I invite any of you, maybe some of the staff ASH staff wants to comment on this.
I'll just quickly say that the number of countries that have endgame goals is multiplying, and I think we're up to around 20 now that have set a low prevalence by a certain date goal, What we need to do is get all these countries to put a plan in place to actually achieve it. The United States is a great example. We are one of those countries. We have a 6.1% by 2030 goal, but utterly no plan to get us there.
Yeah, I think that's yeah, and I think, as you pointed out earlier, is the public support is there. Almost every single survey, even among smokers, and I know there's some papers that are going to be published soon on this. There's more and more work done in this area, and I think it was similar for smoke-free. And I remember some of the politicians that were asked, a health minister in France, after they passed smoke-free policies, they said, I wish I'd done it. If I'd realized how politically palatable it was and how much political support there was for it, I would have done it sooner. So I think it provides an opportunity for us to advance tobacco control at this time in history. I'm conscious of time, so I see that we're getting close to the time. So if we have maybe if we can get to the last slide. I want to remind everyone also that we have this donation going on. So any donation until through January 15 will be matched up to $20,000. So just reminding everyone about this. And also let you know that we have a number of webinars scheduled already for January of 2025. On January 16th, there will be one about our ASHA's 25 priorities and opportunities, where our priorities in tobacco control and where we see key opportunities for engagement. On January 23rd, there's an endgame course live discussion. And on January 30th, tobacco cessation and prevention and the need to ramp up access to cessation treatment in the US. And this is an area also that we're going to be doing more work with colleagues around the world, given that as we move and we towards endgame policies, we also need to make sure that people who smoke have all the support they need to become free from tobacco and nicotine. So I want to thank you again, all of you, for joining us today, and I want to thank the entire staff for the excellent work done this year and the progress done. Also thank all of the collaborators and some of you who have joined us today, Laura and others. I really thank you for all of the support and the continued work that you do with us. And I look forward to continue working with all of you and help us achieve one of our key objectives, a world where no one has to die because of tobacco products. So thank you very much for joining us, and I look forward to continue working with all of you. Bye, everyone.